here in the UK. Welcome everybody to Garden Masterclass. My name is Richard Court. I'm coming to you from the UK in Devon. Really excited about this evening's guest, this evening's book that we will be feasting our eyes on some of soon. I'm just letting in a few more folks, so we'll wait for a moment. How are we doing? Okay, good. So yeah, welcome everybody, wherever you're joining us from. This is our last one of the year, last Thursday Garden Chat of the year. Thanks everybody who's joined us. I know it means a lot to Annie and Noel. It's a fabulous, consistent thing that they bring us every Thursday. My name is Richard Court. Annie and Noel indisposed.
I'm here actually, Richard.
Hey, there's Annie.
I've just made it through the door.
Oh, great.
You carry on.
We get to co-host.
Carry on. No, carry on.
So yeah, fresh in the door, Annie's joined. So before I hand you over to our guests this evening, Andrew Montgomery and Clare Foster, they're going to be showing us and talking to us about their fabulous book called Pastoral Gardens. I'm just doing a little bit of housekeeping. So everything, as I say, it's the last one of the year before the holidays, everybody. So 8th of January is our next webinar, Keeping Up to Date with Grasses with Neil Lucas, which is, I know Neil Lucas is often on talking about grasses. So Keeping Up to Date with Grasses, I'll definitely be tuning into that one. That'll be great. 14th of January is the next Bad Botany, which is in a third season. I'm not tuned into yet, but I'm very curious about. 15th of January, Tom DeWitt's new garden, a Dutch designer, following in the footsteps of Peter Udolph, which sounds really exciting. And then last but not least, there's lots more on here, but these are just the first 4 of the year. 21st of January, Building Ecological Abundance with Claudia West. I'm particularly interested in that myself. I think that looks really, really rich and intriguing, actually. So that's for anybody who does know of Claudia West's work. She wrote Planting for a Post-Wild World, Planting for a Post-Wild World, the book with, I can't remember who the photographer was on that. Do you remember, Annie? I actually have the book. I don't remember who the photographer was,
but it was with Thomas Rayner.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, and just to remind everybody, in terms of this evening's talk, there is a members offer on the members page for the book. And for those of you, I think all of you that will be here this evening, anybody who tunes in afterwards, it's a really spectacular and sublime book full of images that certainly arrested my senses when I came across it, looking at it online yesterday evening. I haven't managed to get all the way through it because it's so exquisite. So without further ado, there we go. It is quite big. I think Andrew actually has some copies in the foreground of his screen, yeah, it is quite big. It's fabulous. Anyway,
it looks really small there, though.
Oh, really?
That's the scale.
It's heavy and it's wonderful.
Fantastic. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to, unless Annie's got anything more to say.
No, Richard, fantastic. No, thank you very much. I just whizzed back from Westdean and I thought, I'm going to make it. So, hey!
Fantastic, yay. Well, it's lovely to see you.
In fact, lovely to see you too. And thank you for opening up for us. That's really lovely. So no, I'm in the background and ready to enjoy it and chat to Andrew and Clare. So I don't know, who's sharing screen? Is it Andrew or Clare?
Clare.
I am.
Clare, lovely. Okay, super. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, where you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us. It's really nice to be here. I'm going to start by just saying a few words of introduction about the kind of ethos of the book and what it's all about. And then we're going to take you through some of the gardens that are in the book with some of the photographs. So Pastoral Gardens is a book about contemporary nature-led gardens. I wanted to kind of take the temperature of the garden design world at the moment and explore the reactions of garden makers to climate change, basically, and look at the innovative and creative ways that people are making more sustainable gardens. So it's a book that I've wanted to write for quite a long time now, and at House and Garden, I've been garden editor there for nearly 20 years now, and then before that was at Gardens Illustrated. So I feel I've had a really amazing vantage point over the whole of the garden design realm, really. And I've seen things change and trends come and go. And, you know, from the 90s, all the kind of garden makeovers of the 90s, through all the new perennial movement. And then I think we have come beyond that, and we're in a much more kind of naturalistic realm, but much more nature-led. And of course, the new perennial movement was very much naturalistic and nature-led as well. But I think the drive there was more aesthetic. You know, it's painting pictures with the perennials, with the plants. Whereas now, people are making gardens as much for the wildlife and nature and insects as much as they are for themselves, really. So it was a fascinating book to work on, and I talked to so many interesting people. I mean, it's just been a fantastic project. It is very much a collaboration between the two of us, and I think both Andrew and I come from a very visual standpoint. The photographs are just as important as the words, and they're designed to work together. And I think both of us think that, you know, that these gardens, their stories need to be told in pictures as well. They need that space to spread out in and tell their stories. And I think one of the reasons we could do that was because we self-published the book, or Andrew did, under his imprint, the Montgomery Press. And he's going to say a little bit about that in a minute, because it meant that we had that creative freedom. And to me, I think the pictures are so important to this book, and that's why it is such a huge tome, because they draw people in. And that was the aim for me, I think. It was to draw people in and to really make them connect with the landscapes, the gardens, the plants, and the wildlife, to give them that sense of connection and to draw them in. So from that point of view, it's a book, you know, not just for gardeners. It's for people who have that interest. It's a book for artists and photographers and all sorts, really. So Andrew, I'm going to hand over to you for a minute to just talk a little bit about the self-publishing business and how that all started.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So can anybody see me? Am I coming up on your screen?
You're good, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Pastoral Gardens is essentially a sequel to Winter Gardens. Winter Gardens was the first book that I completely self-published through Montgomery Press, and that was the first collaboration with Clare. And that idea of wanting to sort of self-publish a book stemmed from the fact of wanting to have control over the paper, the layout, the whole kind of concept of the book, really unconstrained by sort of salespeople and targets, and also what I'd found in the past is that many garden books they'd be like 40 or 50 gardens within a book, and you'd only ever see maybe a handful of pictures. And with our first book, Winter Gardens, we only did 10 gardens, and by doing that, we were able to really sort of explore visually all the nuances contained in the garden visually, and it was very liberating. And we did a very short print run, and the initial run was only 1,000 books, and we went on sale, and the reaction was incredible. The book was not available on Amazon. It was completely kind of motivated through social media and and e-commerce, in the sense that people, if they wanted the book, they would go online and buy the book. But also, we did also want to support small independent bookshops, and so we had some stockists around the country that physically sold the book as well, which was fantastic. But like I say, the book sold out within sort of like 2 months, which was absolutely wonderful. But it then begged the question, like, what do we like? We really wanted to do something else, and so Clare had, obviously, as she just explained, she had this idea to do a book about more environmental and that concept of nature coming into gardens. And also, I suppose we wanted to do something that was as far removed from winter gardens as possible. And, you know, Pastoral is very much about the light, the colour, and the sense of garden in the summer. Although we have explored sort of going into sort of like early autumn as well. So yeah, so we spent the last 2 years putting together the book, but this time, rather than doing 12, we've done 20, just because we just wanted to expand it and also go to America and explore some other countries, which with winter gardens we were very much mostly UK and Europe. And so yeah, the book grew because we just wanted, again, to dedicate as many pictures as we felt the gardens needed when we were doing the layouts, and we didn't want to compromise. And so the book kind of grew, and we just thought, well, we're only going to do a book like this once, you know, it's like a once in a lifetime sort of project. And so that's what we did, and it was just fantastic, and hence the rather weighty tome that we've produced, but we wouldn't have it any other way. You know, we're incredibly proud of it. So that's a little bit of we'll go into more about the photography with Claire, and she can kind of like, you know, lead us through a little bit. But I'll hand back to Claire if that's gives you a little bit of a background to the book.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to take you through some of the gardens, not all of them. There's 20 in total, as Andrew said. And we start the book with fairly traditional gardens, if you like, and gradually through the book we get wilder and wilder. I think we just wanted to show both extremes, really, to show what you can do to bring the wildlife in. So this is Bettiscombe Manor, which is Jasper Conran's garden in Dorset, which you may have seen on Instagram because he posts it quite regularly. And it is the most magical place in this rolling Dorset countryside. And he's made a very beautiful informal garden here. In the past, he's had some pretty grand houses and some pretty formal gardens with lots of topiary. This is the complete opposite, and it just suits the house and the landscape. And he was very, very sure when he moved here that he didn't want to change it totally. He didn't want to kind of barricade nature out. He wanted to let it in. So, you know, there are simple chestnut paling fences to separate the pasture. And then there's a quadrangle of cottage garden beds here. Lots of biodiversity and just very informal. Look, he's got, you know, gooseberries and herbs and everything you can think of in these beautiful beds. Just did some more details of the planting. Yeah, that, as you can imagine, it's an occupational hazard for me that every garden I go to, there are plants that I desire and want. And I came away from this one wanting this wallflower, which is Erysimum apricot twist. And which I have got now in my garden, and it's still flowering now actually, but not in such abundance as this. It's never quite looked the same as this. But yeah, so we photographed close-ups of plants as well. So these are huge in the book, as you can imagine, to draw people in. This is Ashington Manor, which is Julian and Isabel Bannerman's garden in Somerset, their new garden. I think it's 7 years old now. And yeah, this doesn't perhaps look like a wildlife garden, like a pastoral garden, but we wanted to put this one in because I think it shows how you can combine formality with you know, some slightly more relaxed planting. So they put these beehives in as soon as they got there. They spent a fortune shipping them over from Holland, I think. And then they've just contrasted it with this amazing cottage garden planting with lots of Benton irises. Absolutely beautiful. And that's just another view looking out. And then just the other side of those yews, you can just see them there in the corner, is this lovely orchard, and that transitions out to the fields beyond. And so it's not a huge garden, but I mean, it's pretty big in most people's standards, but it's not absolutely huge. And the formal parts of the garden are fairly small. And you just look at a picture like this and think, well, that's all you need: blossom and cow parsley. And here they are themselves. I love these pictures. Andrew, do you want to just say a little bit about why we put the portraits in?
Yeah, so I started my career as a portrait photographer, not a garden photographer. And I suppose because that's always been that's kind of my starting point in the world of photography. And that's how I met Clare, is that through House and Garden, where I'd always been doing portraiture, she'd asked me to do some garden designers and at the same time do some gardens. And from there, I started to do more and more gardens through House and Garden. And I really enjoyed it. I loved it. And then one of the things that I felt when I wanted to do on this book was to show the people behind the gardens. You know, those gardens, the character are as much about the people that make them than the gardens themselves. And the Bannermans is a case in point. Julian and Isabel, they're complete characters, and the way they use planting and their kind of their personality just comes through. They're in harmony with it, and I just find it a lovely thing to show people that of those people enjoying their gardens and being a part of it. And on the evening that we turned up there, Julian was there with his glass of wine in one hand, his cigarette in the other, trying to hold up his loose trousers, stop his trousers falling down, and holding a hose pipe, trying to water his irises, just slightly sozzled, I think, at the time. And you know, it was just lovely. And so there is a lot of that in the book. Where I photographed the owners of the gardens within their spaces, within their gardens, and they're not necessarily looking towards camera. They're just there and just kind of being a part of it. And I wanted to do it also, which I felt was really important, that it's a record. And I always was inspired by those shots where you see Monet painting his lilies in his garden, and you know, Winston Churchill in a garden painting, and you know, you see the painting, but you don't often see the process and the kind of the people in the space. And so that was really important for me to want to sort of show. But also Clare's words and interview and the quotes, you immediately put those quotes with those people, which again is a really lovely connection to make when you're looking at the book. And should I chat about a little bit about Arthur?
Yeah, go on then.
Okay, all right. Well, so this is Arthur Parkinson, and he, as you may know, is a bit of a sort of a unique character in the fact that he's got a brilliant sort of aesthetic when it comes to planting and ecology and chickens. And I'd seen his garden on Instagram, and I kind of mentioned to Clare that I thought this could be a really interesting place to shoot, because really it is a pastoral garden. He's it's given it over to nature and the planting and his chickens. And so I went down to his nan's house in I think it's over in Suffolk, and spent the morning there photographing him.
Nottingham.
Sorry?
Nottingham.
Nottingham, there you go. Near, not far. Yeah, and he's just brilliant. Claire, do you want to say a bit more about Arthur?
Yeah, so this was one of the gardens that we wanted to put in, one of the urban and suburban gardens that we wanted to put in, which was a key decision right at the beginning when we were doing the book, because we wanted to, you know, appeal to everyone, but also to show how people are bringing nature into smaller urban spaces. And so Arthur was perfect. This is his late grandmother's garden in Hucknall, actually, near Nottingham, and it's in a row of these houses that all look the same, apart from Arthur's, which looks like this at the front. So you immediately know it's his, because there's all these flowers spilling over the front. And you know, all the others have just got paving stones at the front and fences and no hedges. And Arthur was just a brilliant interview, because he is so passionate about bringing insect life into the garden, and also is very much an ambassador for gardening and mental health, which was something that we also wanted to touch on in the book. And I'm just going to read you something that one of his quotes from the book, which I thought was rather nice. "The reality is," he says, "we're witnessing a decline in nature that we've never seen on Earth before. We also have a worsening mental health crisis, and a connection to nature can often help. I sit here and observe the life that comes in. Dunnocks and blackbirds live in the hedges. I see goldfinches landing on cornflower seed heads, and I love watching the bees pollinate the flowers. We've chosen this garden as a place for nature to be." And that kind of says it all, I think. That's what we wanted the book to be about. Nature coming into these spaces, wherever you live. And actually, it's even more important for urban spaces, to create this kind of network. And here's Arthur with his chickens. He's so beautiful, and the chickens are so beautiful, so photogenic. Andrew came back from that shoot with literally hundreds of portraits of Arthur.
He was quite unique, and he kind of tested me slightly, because on that photograph, that first photograph that we saw, there's plastic netting, there's his nan's kind of garden kneeler, and you know, as a photographer, you sometimes try to edit those things out, but actually I felt that was kind of doing a disservice to the space, and I wanted to take a truer picture of it as possible, so I included those elements. But Arthur on the day, he turned up in tracksuit bottoms with a white stripe down, a pair of boots, a bright orange t-shirt, and that trench coat, and completely kind of in conflict with everything else around. And normally I would, you know, you might ask someone to change their jacket or change their shirt or something like that. But again, I just thought, do you know what? It's Arthur, it's him. That's the way he's turned up. I'm just going to embrace it. And I'm so glad I did that, because, you know, again, it's just being true to the person and the place. And in the end, it looked great. And as you see in that picture of him, with Arthur and one of his chickens in black and white, it's beautiful. So, yeah, it just goes to show, you know, you never stop learning, I think.
So this is Hortus, which is in Germany. And you wouldn't believe it, but this is in the sanctuary section, which is in the middle of the book, with the urban and suburban gardens, because this is on a ring road on the outskirts of Dusseldorf. And it's just you walk into this space and you feel you're in a completely different world. It's the creation of a plantsman called Peter Janker, and he came over to this country actually to train. He worked with Beth Chatto for a while, and he has stuffed this garden with so many plants, 4,500 species, I think he said. Yet he does it in a really artistic way, and they're all kind of drought tolerant species. So it was just a garden that just really made me, you know, stop in my tracks. Very, very different. And literally you can hear the traffic on the dual carriageway right outside. And people from the city just flock in here every day, and he sells plants and he sells flowers, and it's just this haven. And this is Peter, looking eccentric in his garden. So this is a garden that you may have seen in magazines. It's been in magazines, and I think it's been on Gardener's World with some amazing aerial shots. It belongs to a chap called Andrew Salter, and it's we call it the Barn Garden and it's in Kent. And it's this eccentric wooden narrow barn, a tiny barn in the middle of a field. And Andrew has created this extraordinary garden all around. Annie, I'm sure you've come across him because he was at Dixter. I mean, he wasn't a student there, but I think he volunteered a lot.
Yeah, I haven't actually met him, but I'm familiar with the garden. I've not been there, but I haven't met him. No.
Yeah, well, he's just so interesting and just really passionate about what he does. So he wasn't a gardener at all. He suddenly in his 30s decided that he'd got the bug. He just wanted to garden. A special effects person in TV. I think that he still does that freelance. So he just took himself off to Dixter and various places around the world and started to learn and absorbed it. And now he is that's his life. I mean, he creates this garden. It's full of the most eccentric collection of shrubs and perennials and bulbs and just a huge diversity, and yet it works. And there's a very narrow deck around the house. You can see him standing on it here. So when you're in the house and you're looking out through the windows, it feels like you're kind of amongst the plants and you're not aware of the wider landscape at all. It's really bizarre, but quite magical. And again, I'm just going to read you something that he said to me, because again, it's about that engagement with the garden. I think a lot of the gardens in the book have this in common. They are very much gardened gardens. So it's not just about the design, it's about the ongoing maintenance of them and the engagement of their owner with that garden and therefore with nature as well. So this is what he said to me. The whole place is an extension of me. It's bigger than me. I'm way more observant than I used to be. I'm more conscious of time, the weather and the seasons. I'm more connected to the world, whether it's plants or nature or wildlife. It's been an awakening. I'll be out with friends in London and I'll suddenly think, I want to be back home for the sunset. Life feels fuller. Sounds, smells, sights are sharper. It's an intoxication. I feel a different person, and it's all because of this garden. I just love that. I just think it says to me that he is just absolutely passionate about this garden, and I loved conveying that in the book. So this is Franklin Farm, and it is the garden of Kim Wilkie and Pip Morrison. Again, some of you may be familiar with it. It's very much a private garden. I think they rarely open it, but it is the most stunning space if you ever get the chance to go there, anyone. Andrew and I went there just after lockdown, and it was the first garden that both of us had been in after lockdown, and therefore everything was kind of heightened, and it was just absolutely magical, the atmosphere there. So they have a small holding of about 15 acres, I think, maybe bigger. And they have cattle, and they have lots of meadows around and pasture land, and a very small garden around the house, relatively small. So which is like a kind of little jewel. And then they have meadow, basically going right up to the back door. You can see here, they literally step out of their kitchen and they're in this beautiful meadow. And then there's different meadow. That's the kind of the souped up meadow, if you like, that they've seeded and they tend. And then beyond the ha-ha there's the pasture land, all of course organically managed. And this beautiful curving ha-ha that's made from flints that have been dug from the land. And I think that Kim made this. He's very as you probably all know, he is very much about the land and land formations. So he and Pip make this brilliant combination, because Pip does all this beautiful planting and is very much into this cottage garden style planting, and Kim does all the paths and the land formations, which I think we show here. So very early on, when Kim first came to Franklin Farm, and I think Pip wasn't on the scene then, Kim created a very minimal garden, and you can just see this sunken spiral that he made to display this sculpture by Simon Thomas. And then using the spoil from that, he then made a beautiful mound in a spiral mound. And again, just such a simple device, but so beautiful. And you stand on the top of that and you have views right down to the south coast, I think, on a clear day. I didn't see that, but yeah, really far-reaching views. And here are their beloved cattle. So the whole place is about the landscape and the wildlife and the livestock and the human beings all working together in this synergy. And they have, of course, very beautiful cattle, longhorn cattle, I think they are. And they wanted the cattle to be right next to the garden. So here in this courtyard, they sit here having lunch, and they can just chat to their beautiful cows. Rahuna. So this is a garden in northern Morocco, and it's the creation of this chap, Umberto Pasti, and he is an Italian writer and garden designer. And he tells the story of how he came to be gardening here. He has another house in Tangier. He went for a walk one day about 30 years ago along the coast, and he fell asleep on the hillside under an olive tree and woke up and decided he had to make a garden here on this bare rocky hillside with just an olive tree for shade. And that's exactly what he did. He bought some land, which was very difficult because the land ownership there is very complex, but he managed to buy a patch of land. He built a stone cottage, and then he started planting the garden, and he carved out these terraces, employed lots of the local children and men to help him, and lifted the very rural poor village to be able for them to send their children to school. And he's really brought money and love and incredible things to this tiny village. And above the terraces of the garden is this beautiful hillside, which is his land. And he's nurturing the wildflowers there and adding more. And one of his passions is to save the local flora. So he's got lots of different types of irises. This is Iris germanica, but he has much more unusual irises. We were there a bit late to photograph them because all the irises flower from November through winter in northern Morocco. And one of the irises is Iris tingitana, which is the local tangerine iris, if that's how you say it. And it's becoming quite rare. And he is literally going into development sites and getting all the bulbs and the plants that are just being chucked away on spoil heaps and bringing them back to his garden and nurturing them there. So he's a really, really extraordinary man. And this is him sitting on one of his tile benches. He's a great collector, so his houses are full of artifacts. You know, he has pieces of textile, pieces of tile, bones and seed heads, and his houses are cabinets of curiosities, and then his gardens, as you can see here, are just stuffed full of different plants. There are no rules or regulations or design rules or anything, but it is the most magical place. And this is up on the hillside, a shot taken either at dawn or dusk. And Andrew, I don't know whether you want to say a little bit here about how important light is when we're photographing gardens.
Well, absolutely. I mean, especially for this book as well, light is just what gives it its atmosphere and that sense of magic. I wanted in the book to evoke that lovely time on a summer's evening when the sun's gone down and there's that stillness in the air and everything's got that lovely sort of golden glow. People call it golden hour. Some people call it blue hour, depending on if it's in the morning or in the evening. But for me, it's that last hour of the day, and the quality of light is just sublime. And it just trying to sort of capture that in the pages was really the goal for me photographically, to make you feel like that you're there. Or if it's a grey, wet, miserable winter's day, that you can look at the book and think, oh, it just takes you back to those moments. And it, you know, Morocco at that time of year when we went, it's May, you know, it's a beautiful time to be there. You know, everything's lush and green, and the air being by the sea is incredibly clear. There's always a little bit of rain that's clearing at some point in the day, and as you can see by this shot, this was in the morning, and the sun is just coming up, and it's before that it gets too harsh. You do just get this quite ethereal sort of feeling to the landscape. And so that's also me as a photographer. That's when I love to shoot. That to me is the time when you can really everything kind of is quite subtle, but you get to see everything. Everything becomes very clear, and it also provides the greatest challenge, because during those summer months, as we know, the sun gets up really early. You know, it rises very early, so you're waking at sort of like 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you're done by sort of 6:37, and the same goes for the evening. You know, you're up and out in the garden with your camera until sort of like 10:30, 11, sometimes, depending on whereabouts you are. So they're quite long days, but you know, they are the most wonderful times to shoot. And that's really what the book, you know, I wanted to evoke in the imagery, really, is that sense of the light and the play of it within the gardens.
Yeah, to me, I think the best time to be in a garden is at dawn, when the light is just coming up, because it is magical. I'm sure a lot of you will know that. And I feel that magic, and therefore the photographs have to be taken at that time of day to then convey that magic, because you know the same place at midday can look washed out and harsh. So it's absolutely essential in all garden photography. I think photographers just cannot be shy of early mornings or late evenings.
Claire and I have been on many shoots together, and you know, that it would be in the summer, and we'd arrive at sort of like 7 o'clock in the evening, but we would just have to wait. We'd have to be patient, although we were itching to kind of make a start. We couldn't, because the light was too contrasty. So we would just be waiting and waiting, and then you get to that moment, and then we'd spend sort of an hour and a half sort of frantically just trying to capture that magic within the space. But this is not
this next one.
Yeah, this is quite the opposite in sense of in terms of the feeling of light and warmth and everything. But this is Umberto's skull tree, which kind of, you don't expect when you walk into that garden, but that is also one of its charms, is that you don't know what you're going to be confronted with from one sort of corner to the next. And we were walking through, and then we came upon this little clearing, and there was this tree, and I just thought, oh my God, that looks incredible. But at the same time, you think it also looks quite paganistic, slightly dark, slightly kind of, this could be a little bit, not quite sure. But again, with the book, I just felt that to embrace it and put it across 2 pages and to celebrate it, and also it just lent itself so beautifully to black and white. But the story behind it is there's nothing. It's actually quite sweet, because what Umberto would do is that he kind of tasked the local children to kind of scour the countryside to find him animal skulls, and when they would bring one back to him, he'd give them a couple of pounds or a couple of rupees, whatever it is in Moroccan money, and they would go away very happy. And that's what he decorated this tree with. And it was incredible. And it was all these kind of bones hanging from the branches, and the bones would kind of make that wind chimey sound when the wind blew. But that again is that's Rahuna, and I think it's just fascinating.
Yeah, and again, we didn't have publishers hanging over us going, oh, you can't possibly put that in, it's too different, it's too scary. So we did. And it shows the personality of the place, I think, and the depth of it. So on to the next garden now, and this is not Rahuna. I forgot to change that. This is Robin Hill, which is a garden in Connecticut that was designed by Dan Pearson. And we went last autumn to photograph it. And it is the most extraordinary place, a very experimental garden from Dan, who is getting very, very, very nature-led and less intervention, I think. And so the owner of this place is an art gallerist in New York, a very kind of metropolitan person. And she bought this place and was frankly terrified, because you can see the woodland around, very, very thick forest, and she felt like nature was kind of encroaching. So Dan had to come up with a solution for this, and she had already said that she didn't feel a formal garden would work here at all. So he made this incredible perennial meadow in front of the house that is just a kind of softener into the landscape around. And actually, Dan was really interesting, and he's in the interview that we did, and he said something that really stuck with me, which was that, you know, that gardens are these transition points, these linking points into nature, and that's what they're designed for. And it just made me think, well, of course, you know, gardens are there as that link into nature, and it's how we learn about nature. You know, we're learning about the life cycles of plants in gardening, and we're connecting with the seasons, and we're learning about the soil, and we just have that deeper connection with nature, and it just makes us think about it more. So it was a really, really interesting place, and only perennials, only native perennials in this garden, nothing ornamental added at all. Behind the house on the left, there is a cutting garden, but as you can see, it's not a cutting garden of straight lines and raised beds. It's a very kind of informal cutting garden, but this is where Dan felt that he could introduce some more ornamental plants. Although a lot of them, you know, like these asters here are native. I don't know whether those are, I can't remember what variety those are. But I mean, obviously there are some really beautiful North American native plants that we grow as ornamentals over here. And then the other thing that he did in this garden was to clear the woodlands and make some stone sculptures and this beautiful stone cairn, which you come across in the dappled shade, and it's magical, really, really magical, and it works really well here, I think, in black and white. Onto Knepp, which I'm sure is a garden you'll all know about and perhaps have been to. I think it's just one of the most extraordinary and experimental gardens of the current time, and if you haven't been, then I really recommend it. Designed, of course, by Tom Stuart Smith and James Hitchmo for Isabella Tree and Charlie Burrell, and it sits right in the middle of their huge estate that they've been rewilding now for 20 plus years. And this walled garden in the middle used to be a croquet lawn and an ornamental kitchen garden. And they suddenly realized that actually that really wasn't giving the right message and didn't tie in with the wider estate. So they called in Tom Stuart Smith. And I mean, of all the gardens in the book, this is the one that is really led by nature. Obviously, it's managed. It's not, rewilding is not leaving everything, as you know. It is very much managed by head gardener Charlie Harper, who is the keystone species. And so he is editing out all the thuggish species. But then the thuggish species aren't particularly thuggish here because of the substrates they're using, which is all this crushed rubble and gravel. So the diversity there is absolutely extraordinary because there isn't that competition. So you get the nuances of planting, like this picture on the left, is just absolutely beautiful, and you can get lost in them. And no irrigation whatsoever. And just such beauty and some really, really interesting plants. As Tom Stuart Smith put it, he said it's a mixture of natives coming in and ornamental plants. So he called it a pan-global knees up of plants, which I thought was great. And this plant on the right, Bouquet Perforea, I've tried to grow her, having seen it there, and with a tiny degree of success. Some of them germinated, and I've had a couple flowering in my garden this year. Just a very easy plant once you've got it going, I think. So moving on now to Brook Manor, and this is a garden in Devon that belongs to a couple called Donna and Kevin Cox. Kevin used to be the chairman of the RSPB. I think he's recently stepped down. And they used to own a publishing company, and I think it was a publishing company it was after my time, but that published Gardens Illustrated. And they sold the company, and then they bought this estate and moved down here. They're passionate about wildlife, and they are regenerating this estate and in particular making habitats for birds, and just putting a very, very light touch on the landscape. So this is a kind of wet habitat valley, and they've rerouted the stream here, and all these wildflowers are coming back. We weren't there at the right time to see the flag irises, but apparently it's just a sea of colour when the flag irises are out, and then it's followed by water dropwort. And they are seeing thousands of orchids coming back into their regenerated meadows. So something that Donna said, and just quote from her, she said, "In total, we have 85 species of grasses and wildflowers in this meadow, compared to the 3 or 4 species in the average grassland field in the UK now. Because of intensive agriculture, Britain is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, and most people don't realise that our emerald green rolling hills are actually a desert. It's my mission to show people the alternatives and to show them that these green fields are not as beautiful as people think." So it's just things like that. It just does make people think. And she's part of a a network, a meadow network in Devon, and they're just creating this huge kind of patchwork of meadows that are joining up all over the county. Just really, really inspiring people. Andrew, over to you to talk about the wildlife pictures and photographs in the book.
Yeah, so the book is split into 4 sections. As Claire mentioned, the first one, informality, then we go to sanctuary, then we go to landscape, which is gardens such as Rahuna, and then the last one is habitat. And the habitat chapter is kind of, it's my favorite because it provided me with the biggest challenge, because that was very much the most nature-led chapter of the book. But I wanted to photograph that nature, because again, in garden books, there's always the reliance on picture libraries and stock photography. And I wanted this book to take my own pictures of the wildlife that were in those habitats. And Brook Manor, I always get the name slightly wrong, but the pied fly catchers. When I went there first with Claire, we heard the story that they reinstated the habitat for these birds, and they were bringing them back. And at that springtime, they go round and they ring and weigh, and they make notes on the chicks before they fledge. And I said to them, I'd love to photograph that kind of process, and maybe even photograph the birds in the nest. So they said, yeah, that would be fine, but we need to put you in touch with our kind of a sort of on-site ecologist. So it was actually this spring, the ecologist and I, we were a separate WhatsApp group, and I was on this sort of 24-hour notice when the birds were about to fledge, because at that point he would take them out the nests, ring them, weigh them, put them back, and then literally within a few hours they would fly off. So I got the call, went down, and we went out early one morning, and he said, I've got a box that I think is going to be perfect. The only snag was that the box was about 14 foot up a tree. And I said, okay, but we had a ladder. Sadly, the ladder wasn't quite tall enough to get to the box itself. So what he did was he kind of lifted the lid of the box up, and I climbed up the ladder and literally raised up my hand with the camera, peered and put the camera over the nest and just fired off 20 or 30 frames. And this was one of the shots that I got, which was absolutely, fantastic. And literally what happened the next day, they'd gone, the chicks had fledged. And so that was just a really lovely thing for me to sort of show that in amongst the garden as well. So yeah, and Claire's kind of flick into Old Lands, which again is another place where the ecology and the insect life is paramount, and the garden is absolutely there for nature, and to encourage it as much as possible. And this is Samba Sanquay, who is absolutely lives and breathes moths. And again, on this time, I'd always had this kind of ambition to go out and photograph these people that at 3 a.m. they set up a light box and they do the little kind of census of moths and stuff that are inhabiting the garden, and that was wonderful. And this was the night before, and this was in that kind of moment of golden hour as well, where Sam's out and he's sweeping. And this to me is just one of my favorite photographs in the book, precisely because of the challenge of actually setting up that moment where the right time for Sam to go out and do that, getting the weather and getting the atmosphere and the light all come together. And obviously, the logistics of busy schedules and stuff. And so, yeah, this was that moment. And the hawk moth on the right was one of the ones that we caught that early morning. And I said to Sam, I'd love to photograph them. And he said, well, okay, what we can do, and what he did do, is that he caught a handful and very gingerly put them into a little Tupperware container, and then took them into his kitchen and put them in the fridge, which sounds quite unkind, but what it does, it just slows the heart rate of the moths right down. And I'd set up my tripod with a little piece of paper, and then Sam went to the fridge, got the Tupperware pot, and very gingerly put them off directly under my lens. And I had about 4 or 5 seconds before the blood sort of flowed back around the moth, and he thought, what am I doing here? And he was off flying out the window. But what I love about the inclusion of these images in the book is that you really do see the beauty of the insects and the colours, and just how wonderful nature is. And we don't see that. You don't see that because obviously we're in bed or they're off flying around. And so to capture that was really important. And also, again, to include it in the book in amongst the gardens, because it's so often talked about but never shown. And I just thought it's lovely to have the juxtaposition where you have the people, you have the planting, but you also have the nature that is being encouraged into that habitat. So I'm very proud to have them in the book. And also there is one picture, I might even be able to find it in this, but I had this idea that I wanted a moth, a double page spread in the book, just to sort of show the glory of it, really. And obviously that's one great thing about being the publisher, is that you can do that and no one's going to tell you can't do that. And I'll just go to the picture.
Sorry, I should have put it on the PowerPoint.
Don't worry, Claire, I understand.
People won't be able to see it very well on your screen, on your.
Oh, they won't. Okay, well,
okay.
I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can see me, but that's the picture. I love having that sort of shot in the book.
Yeah, no, it means everything, because it's just the ethos of the whole book is, the people are gardening for nature, and we wanted to show why and what, the beauty in all the insects that we're trying to encourage back in. So this is White Hollow. This is the last garden in the book, and it can barely be called a garden, although its owner does call it a garden. It's a meadow, it's a landscape around this tiny little cabin in upstate Connecticut, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it belongs to an artist called John Paul Philippe. And I wanted to put this in because it kind of throws into question the very term garden and gardening. It really makes you think, well, what is a garden? Because he calls it his garden, and this space is just full of native plants and nothing else. The paths are made by animals. He might mow around a path, but before that point the animals have made it, so it's completely led by nature. And here he is, John Paul Philippe, feeding the birds at the bird feeding station. He bought the land and the place from an eccentric chap, an ornithologist, who interviewed people to get the right person to sell his property to, because he'd managed it as a bird sanctuary essentially, and he wanted the next person to keep that ethos. And this is exactly what John Paul has done. He's also an artist, so the garden is just full of these really intriguing little vignettes. And this is his meadow, and he calls these his herbaceous borders, because they're full of asters and goldenrod and gentians, things that look ornamental, but of course they grow naturally there. So we wanted to put this in to show that sometimes less is more. So we've gone from the traditional cottage gardens at the front to this at the back, to show the full spectrum and to show people what they can do. And hopefully, you know, I do like to think that by gardening in this way we can make a difference, and I passionately believe that we can, as gardeners, to whatever's going on in the world, and we have to have that hope, I think. So I'll end on that positive note.
Very positive note. Do you want to come out of screen share?
Yes.
Now I know, Richard, you're on a time limit. You need to dash off, don't you? Or are you okay for a moment?
I'm good for now. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Because I know
I'm very relaxed after that.
Well, that's great.
I don't want to leave.
you're host with the most tonight, but I just want to kick off the questions because I'm like that. There's a few things I've got, and then people, please do put questions in the question box. How did you choose the cover shot?
Andrew.
Wow. Okay.
You arm wrestled.
So well, that was there was a picture that I kind of landed on that I thought would be great, but Clare kind of wrestled me away from it.
It was from it was from the last garden.
Yeah, it was
non-garden. It was too radical.
Yeah, I kind of pushed Clare a bit too far, but really the one at Franklin Farm, it just had everything, and you know the
it's beautiful. Yeah,
what I love about it is that, you know, you've got the ha at the bottom, which just makes that lovely line, and you can set the wording in. And it's just, and it's got the light, it's got the atmosphere, and it's got that warm glow, which is what I wanted the book to evoke. We wanted to do a happy book, really. I know it's so sad, but it's a really positive, warming thing. That it's a sense of escapism, really. And that photograph, you know, it was always going to be that one. Once we put it up, once I put the text on, there was no contest, really.
It does work really well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the thing that you were saying about having the freedom to write what you like, you're not being commissioned, it's all up to you. How hard is it for you both now to do commissioned work when you're working on something that you have such freedom on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to have some commissioned work because it's your bread and butter.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think I can still do that. It's fine as long as I'm not too constrained. But actually having this freedom, this creative freedom, is a joy. Actually, it really is. And I do have a very good editor. I am edited, thank goodness.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's that's an interesting question, because when you're working for someone else, I mean, it's really interesting because you know the whole process, and you know I just done a book with Fiden, the Tulip Garden, with Polly, which was brilliant, and Fiden are an excellent publisher, and it's interesting because, you know, all the stages you're very familiar with making. You've got it for the press, the kind of all those decisions, the cover tries, the paper, and everything like that. But you do have a say, but at the end of the day, you're not the one that makes the final decision. So, and that's what drove me to want to set up Montgomery Press, was because I didn't always feel that those decisions were the right ones in the past, you know, for the work, or, you know, for the subject matter, and also the time that you put in. These are incredibly work heavy, you know, like this is 2 years of Clare and I working, you know, long trips, long hours, and you put so much into it. And that's just not this book, that's all the books that I do, you know. They are labors of love. So I there have been a few occasions, not very not that many, but on those occasions where the cover image or something has not been right, and it's kind of slightly disheartening because they are such parts of you, really.
Yeah, it's so very
so it's brilliant being able to not to have to just be unconstrained, really.
Yeah. And I don't think you mentioned this when you were chatting, the pair of you, but you have got 4 essays in there from Ginny, Blom and Nigel Dunnett, Kim Wilkie and Tom Stewart Smith.
Yes.
So why did you feel that you needed to do that? What was the decision behind that? I mean, it's lovely to have them, but was to have other people come in. What was the thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I decided that wasn't decided right at the beginning, but I just felt that it would kind of give us more weight.
Yeah.
And just another perspective. I just, it's always really good, especially when you're tackling something that is changing by the minute, basically. And I feel that garden design is on the cusp of a big change at the moment. I just thought it would be really interesting to bring those perspectives in from those other garden designers. So yeah, I hope that worked.
That's good. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things. Is that we do have, if you're a member of Garden Masterclass, we do have a discount, 10% discount for members on the website in the members section. Now, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, but Noel has put it on the members benefits page at the top rather than in the retail. So if you go into the retail section, it isn't there. It's when you go into members benefits drop down menu, and there's a 10% offer there. It's got a code for you to get through to Montgomery Press, and then it's got a discount code, so it's all there for you to take advantage of. And I also wanted to mention that NEP, you're pointing out, we do have next year for one of our live events, we are repeating our day at NEP with James Hitchmo and Charlie Harper, which was a fantastic day last year. So that's great. Richard's just had to leave us, but I wanted to thank him before he left, but he's got to go, and it was lovely to have him introduce you both. I don't know if anyone else has any questions. We've got some lovely comments. In fact, there's a comment saying, I think this is from Emily, I think the black and white portrait shots are so effective. You have such a way of telling a person's story, and the images will stay with me for a while. And I think I was thinking, as you were talking about including people, very often in magazines, people are not included in the garden shots. And I think it does give you a completely different perspective when you see the person. And I particularly like the picture of Sarah Price kind of walking into the garden. I think that's such a beautiful shot. And the people doing something, they're not, apart from the Bannermans slightly posed, but the others, they are more about people in the garden, almost like they're not being photographed, and it just gives you this other perspective, doesn't it? It gives you this personal.
When we did Rahuna, we'd never been. I'd never been before, but Umberto was showing us around, and I was just following him and just shooting him, kind of getting lost into kind of picking at some seed heads and doing. And it's just again, they're not all. I think they're really important photographs to take, and because they're records of that person in their garden, and I just think it just anchors it so nicely. And as I say, being a portrait photographer, I'm kind of drawn to that. It kind of I want to see the person, I want to see the character, I want to see their, but also that, as you say, Sarah Price, there's a shot where she's looking at me, but most of the other shots, they're just doing their thing, and that's what they do. And it's like you're a little fly on the wall, you in a way you're allowing you're it's a window into their world. I mean, we all go in our gardens in the evenings and in the mornings, and it's just being a fly, that the camera just kind of being there for those moments where we just kind of, it's our kind of go-to sort of place to kind of get away from the world, and really capturing that was great. And I'm really pleased, because we didn't do that in Winter Gardens. It was more about just the sort of the sparseness and the lines and the graphicness and the sort of bleakness. But that's why on this one we really wanted to make sure that we brought them in.
Yeah, and I love the portrait of Emily Earlham as well. I think that's really lovely.
Yeah, the funny thing is that that's quite a bold. I don't think she took to it right away. She saw the book and she saw the picture. She said, "Oh," because I think it's one of those cameras are quite unforgiving. in the sense that we all sometimes think we look something different than what we are. But actually, when I first spoke to her, she wasn't keen on it. But then I spoke to her a few weeks later, and she said, "Oh, I quite like it now." She got used to seeing herself, and I said to her, "I think it's quite prosaic, quite dignified. It's you know." I think it was, and so I think she's kind of softened a lot.
Yeah, I suppose we don't often see our profiles, I guess, and that it's very much a profile shot, isn't it? Which is maybe that's
but that's portrait. And some people, and I said this to someone the other day, when you take their portrait, the camera, they can change, they can look different on camera than they do in real life. I mean, some actors do that, you know, in real life you don't really recognize them, but on camera they are who you see. And that's interesting to me, you know.
No, definitely. Well, the comments we've got, lots of lovely comments. Richard had to go and he said, "Thank you, Claire and Andrew, so much. Wonderful to virtually meet you both. What an exquisite and thought-provoking book," which it certainly is. And and a lot of people here seem to have it on their Christmas list or have just received a copy of it, so I think
excellent.
We're preaching to the converted on this, but obviously when it goes up onto YouTube, people will be seeing it.
And one important thing, and just to reiterate, like we're not on Amazon. We didn't, the whole point was not going that route. You know, it's you know, on Montgomery Press, www.montgomerypress.co.uk. Links are also in everywhere. But it's the response has been lovely, you know, and it's in a way it's just a nice way to kind of, I think it's a new way of doing things. I photograph a lot of artisans, and they don't go and sell into sort of galleries and shops so much. It's very much about through social media, and when they have a product, they put it live on their page, and people just go onto their online store and they buy it, and they get it the next day, you know. And that's kind of model of, and I don't think anybody had done that before in terms of book publishing, because they'd always, you know, it's always the big publishers and stuff and going into bookshops. But I love that idea where it is so direct, you know, and it does enable us to do the books that we want, and hopefully that people will want to buy.
Well, then that leads to the next question: is what's number 3?
Well, we were just talking about that. We just, Claire and I.
So you're not saying that, you're not saying no. So there will be a number 3.
Oh yeah, there will be. There is there will be a third one.
Great.
And we're starting from ground zero in the sense that nothing has been shot yet. But Claire had an idea that she said to me, and took me back a little bit, but then I absolutely loved. And then I talked to her about it again today, and she's thinking about it, and I said, no, this is great. I want to do it. I want to do it.
Great. Oh gosh, we're all waiting with bated breath then.
We won't say it. Don't say
it. Don't give the game. No. We need, this needs to be the suspense.
You've got to wait 2 years. It's going to be 2 years. But what I will say is that you've got to have subject matter to do this. You've got to love the idea, and the whole thing is that Claire and I make books that we want to buy, that we would want to have on our coffee table. That is it, 100%. We're making books that we want to see, you know, and if we want to see it, then we hope that other people would want to see it. And so when Claire came up with this idea, I thought, oh yeah, I really want to see that book. And that's the thing, you want to see it, so that motivates you to make it happen. I mean, that is the thing. It's like, that's the thing that gets you out of bed at 3 a.m, or gets you to drive 400 miles to Scotland or wherever you end up going, you know, because you need that drive. And you know, when you're a small team that produce these things, we're not big. It's like there's literally 4 or 5 people that produce the books in total. it's a lot of responsibility and pressure. And so you've got to be prepared to believe in what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, you have literally and physically got a big act to follow after this book.
It won't be as big as, I promise. It's not. No, it won't be bigger than that.
Huge. It's lovely.
No. It'll be about that big.
Okay, the micro book. Oh well, listen, thank you so much, you two, for putting the time aside to talk us through it, because it really is such a beautiful book. I mean, it's gorgeous to look at. You just get lost in it. So congratulations, and I don't even need to wish you good luck, because it's going to fly off the shelves. Because
thank you.
And you know, it's going to be under everyone's Christmas tree, hopefully. So thank you both very, very much, and I hope you both have a fantastic Christmas.
We wish everybody out there a happy Christmas, and if everybody has bought a book, then we thank you so much for supporting what we've done. We really appreciate it.
And of course, it makes a lovely gift. If you've got one, buy one for someone else.
There you go.
But anyway, thank you both, and thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you in January, and have a lovely, peaceful, restful, gorgeous Christmas, and see you next year, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks, Annie.
All the best. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.